Hey, welcome to UK Wildgrass. So I've had a few people ask me if I could do a video on foraging etiquette, and they say they can get a bit confused because there's a lot of conflicting views when it comes to foraging, and it can be quite unclear because there's a lot of grey areas with foraging laws and foraging etiquette. So in this video I've made a list of do's and don'ts for foraging, but first of all I'd just like to say something about foraging laws, and this bit's only really relevant if you're foraging in the UK, but the rest of the video is pretty much universal. Now, according to current UK law, it is illegal to uproot any plant without the landowner's permission. Now, you are legally allowed to forage on common land for the 4 F's, so that's fungi, fruit, foliage and flora, but you're only allowed to take a reasonable amount. So basically what they're saying is you can only forage for your own personal consumption. You can't forage for commercial gain without a license. Now, there may be some local bylaws that you need to check, so I'd recommend checking gov.uk website and just searching for foraging laws. And also, if you're not from the UK, just check your appropriate government website. So as for the list of foraging do's and don'ts, I'll begin with the don'ts. And this first one has always been my own personal #1 rule for foraging, and that is don't taste test anything. So any mushroom or plant that you pick, you need to be 100% sure that you can identify it before you eat any part of it. There are some plants out there like the hemlock water dropwort and mushrooms such as the death cap that can kill you with just a mouthful, so be sure that you can identify it first. It might seem quite obvious, but there are still quite a lot of people out there that do taste test plants. So next up, it's a good idea not to strip a whole area bare or to strip a whole plant bare of its fruit. It's generally good practice to not take more than a third of a plant's fruit. So that's a third for yourself, a third for other foragers or animals, and a third for the plant to regenerate. You shouldn't forage in triquetrum sites, that is sites of special scientific interest. These are generally pretty well fenced off, and there's notices put up saying that you're in one of these sites. And there's plenty of places you can forage, and these triquetrum sites there's not very many of them, so there's not really any need to forage in them. And they could have some really rare orchids or butterflies or something like that breeding there, so yeah, it's best not to forage at all in these sites. Another point for your own safety is it's best not to forage on the edges of agricultural lands, and you should be aware of any vegetation that looks brown or dying off when it's still in season, and that is because a lot of farmers spray the edges of their land with pesticides or herbicides, and those poisons can be passed on to you if you eat those plants. And the same goes with country lanes along the edges of the roads. Sometimes the council spray with herbicides there as well. So try not to spread invasive species. Like in the UK, for example, Himalayan balsam is a very invasive species. So if you're picking it, try not to let the seeds spread. They've got a little spring in the seed pod which flick the seeds quite far, and they often go into rivers because they grow alongside rivers, and then the seeds go further upriver and spread quite quickly. So maybe just use like a paper bag over the top of the seed head to stop these seeds from being spread. That being said, do eat as many invasive species as you like, as long as they're edible, of course, such as the 3-cornered leek, a very good edible and very invasive. So you've got no guilt at all of picking as many as you like. I'll leave a list of all the invasive species of the UK down in the description of this video. So it's important if you use the plant ID apps, like you can get like I think Plant Snap or even like Google Lens do it now. If you use those, do not trust them 100%. They're okay to use if you're just wanting to learn a plant and they can put you in the right ballpark. They might tell you something that's nearly right, so then you can go home and research it yourself in books or on the internet. But do not take them as 100% identification, because people have done that and it's given them the wrong plant and it's made them ill. I've used them myself, and I used it on hemlock water dropwort, one of the most deadly plants in the world, and it told me, first of all it told me it was parsnip, and then it told me it was celery. Both plants in the same family, but both edible plants. If I would have trusted the app, then I'll probably be dead. So yeah, do not, if you're going to use them, do not trust them 100%. So these last couple of points on things you shouldn't do when you're foraging. As I mentioned earlier, they are definitely illegal in the UK, but as for the rest of the world, if you're from another country, you'll need to check for yourself. First of all, it is illegal to uproot any plants on common land, and it's also illegal to uproot plants on private land without the landowner's permission. It is obviously fine to dig up plants on your own land though. Also, you shouldn't forage for commercial gain unless you have a license. So you can't just go around picking loads of plants and selling them without a license. Again, it is fine to pick plants on your own lands to sell. So now just a few things that I recommend that you do when you're foraging. So number one, if you're trying a wild food for the first time, I recommend that you only try a small amount of it. There are some plants and mushrooms that, even though they're not toxic or poisonous, they can cause reactions in some people. Like for example, chicken of the woods, I think somewhere around 15% of the population do get a bit of an allergic reaction to it. So I recommend you just try a very small amount, and if like the next day you're not having any sort of allergic reaction, then it should be fine to eat. It's a good idea to have a foraging guidebook. I recommend Food for Free by Richard Mabey. You can get a pocket-sized version, which is very good for out in the field. Also, the Forager's Calendar by John Wright is very good, especially for beginners. But whichever book you get, it's a good idea to get one that's got photos rather than drawings, because it's a lot easier to make a mistake from looking at a drawing than a nice clear photo. And I also keep books at home that are a bit more in depth, so I can look at plants, take them home and research them from that. It's also a good idea to be aware of your surroundings when you're foraging. You don't want to be foraging next to really busy dog walking areas or through alleyways, and also you don't want to be foraging next to really busy roads due to the pollution from the traffic. So as I said before, you should only take what you need. You don't want to be stripping an area bare. You want to leave enough for other foragers, and more importantly for the wildlife from that area, and obviously so the plant can regenerate. But in my experience, mostly people that forage are more in touch with nature, so they're more respectful for nature, and yeah, just make sure that you do the same. Don't strip an area bare. And it is, in the long run, it's probably better for the environment foraging, because if you think you're picking plants that are growing locally to you, rather than getting plants that are grown from the other side of the world that are then shipped over and wrapped in plastic. It's a good idea to give plants a quick wash before you eat them, especially if they're grown at ground level, like pineapple weed. I'll always give a good wash before I eat them, because there's a chance that they've been in a dog walking area. But like if I'm going to dry a plant, like flowers or something, then I won't wash them, and it's best to pick them on a dry day, because it can cause mildew if you pick them when they're wet. If you can think of any other points on foraging etiquette, then please leave them in the comment section below. Thanks for watching. If you haven't already, you can subscribe to UK Wildcrafts here.